we have a second?
Second that, Mark.
Second for Mr. Frisha. So I'm going to poll the committee if I could. Ms. Giositz?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffrey Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Salvatore?
Abstain.
Very good. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Katia Santiago Taylor, please.
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher?
I thought I said yes, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Ms. Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Frisha?
Yes.
Dr. Goff?
Yes.
And I'm not certain that, did I miss anybody? I think that's the role of everybody that's present. So it is a, pardon me?
It's got me.
I think Jack, I did call you.
No, you called Jack Fisher.
Okay, Jack. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We have two Jacks. Mr. Conroy.
Yep.
Thank you. So
And I
we have.
vote yes too, Mark. Nancy
Oh, Nancy, I'm
Gallivan.
sorry. That's right, too. You made the motion. So Ms. Gallivan votes yes as well. So it is unanimous. We have approved the meeting minutes. So with that, I believe I'm turning the meeting over to Mr. Pena. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Good. Thank
Well,
you.
I wanted to welcome everyone to tonight's building committee meeting. You've probably received numerous emails and a lot of information. This is a huge night at one of our first milestones in the project. Before we start, I do want to ask everyone if they can see the screen okay, because we have a lot of material to cover. If anyone can't, maybe they can just type in the chat box. We can use the chat box throughout the meeting if you have something that you want to chime in on, and I'll try and keep track of that as we go through the meeting. A quick overview of tonight is we're going to review the preliminary design program, also known as the PDP. We're going to get through that document, and then at the very end of that review, there's going to be any questions answered, and then we're going to try to vote on submission of this to the MSBA. Two new pieces of information that you'll see tonight are some East Street options, which were requested in our last meeting. And now we also have conceptual cost estimates from our cost estimator, which TAPE has incorporated into the presentation on each of the options. After that, we're going to have a quick update on the enrollment decision, which is not going to be made tonight, but will be a hot topic in December. And then last but not least, an administrative item, which is the approval of the October VIP. We do have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. I want to hand the meeting over now to Charlie Hay of TAPE Architects, and he's going to start with the overview of the PDP document, and then we'll get into the options.
Thank you, Tony. This will go very quickly, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach to ask. So as we've been mentioning, the MSBA really prescribes the process for each of these, what they call modules, but each of these milestone submissions. So the content is pretty well laid out for us. We've done a number of these at this point, and they all have the same general content and goals, and we've had success in the past satisfying the MSBA's expectations. So, and again, the PDP is really the fact-finding phase, right? We're not making decisions. We're not really doing any designing yet. We're trying to make sure that what the MSBA wants to know at the end of the PDP is, yes, you have a viable site. And in your case, you have two. And yes, that suitable due diligence has been done on the existing buildings and the existing sites. And three, and most importantly, as we've been talking all along, is that the district has prepared an ed program that lays out an expectation and a vision for the district for what they need in terms of educating their students. So the introduction for this document, which you may or may not have looked at, really has it just summarizes the process to date in terms, even back to when you were doing your early SOIs, et cetera. It also includes a directory and a schedule. And then, of course, we have the ED program, which really is the capstone, and Bridget worked incredibly hard on, and congratulations for getting through it. It's always a big lift, but it's exciting to have it, and it will be a hugely important tool going forward in terms of design, and it really is the touchstone for the MSBA. They expect everything to go back to that ED program. Next slide. And so then, of course, the templates we've been sharing with you all the way along, and those really are a list of rooms, both a list of rooms of what you have now and a list of rooms about what the district would like to see in the future. And again, it is prescriptive. It is based on the MSBA's template, and we very carefully in this document through a narrative describe anywhere where we're not precisely in compliance with the MSBA's space template. And that doesn't mean the MSBA will have a problem with it so much as they expect a kind of a explanation for where we have variances. So it's a variance narrative, and that's what 3.1 is. But then we've included the templates and the existing conditions. Next slide. And then we do an evaluation of the existing conditions. You've seen that all of our consultants have gone through both buildings, and all our consultants have gone through both sites. We've done an environmental testing, and that's really an important piece of this. Next, please. Is there another slide, Tony, or have I lost you?
Should be on number 5.
Charlie, are you there?
Seems like Charlie might have froze up, so his feed might have froze up. Maybe you could just take over, Chris.
Yeah, so he was just talking about the slide before that was the, can you go back one? Yeah, the existing conditions. So on the right, you see a picture of some of the deficiency plans that are part of that existing conditions, just to highlight some of the things that are deficient about the building. And then on the next slide, these numbered sections are from the table of contents for the PDP. And the site development requirements section is really just where you see the site plans and site analysis, and then some permitting ideas and things of that nature. And then the alternatives really is the section 6. And so that's where you see most of what we've kind of shown you so far and what is on the agenda for tonight. And so you can go to the next slide. Previously to this meeting, and it was the last time we met, we had shown you a lot of options, and I think you had those before as well. But this group said, what about building on top of the field? And the idea here is that we were looking at options on the fields, and we were trying to isolate what our options actually are over there. And the first idea was, well, what if we left the varsity baseball field in its place, because that's where it is now, and that's that could work. And so working off of the dimensions for that size of field, and then putting an access road, and then segregating off the sort of sloped hill on the north side of the site towards the neighbors on the north, and getting to the flat part of the site that we can build on. We just kind of the test fit shows how much space a building would actually take up on that side of the site, and the key takeaway here is that the parking that's on the south side of the site doesn't fit inside of where it needs to fit to be one contiguous lot. And so you would either have to do part of it there and then part of it over on top of where the existing bird is now. And maybe you could get a little bit closer than that, but the reality is that you're pretty far away from where the front door of the school would be, just because of where that baseball field is now. And then the other idea that we did was on the next slide, which was looking if we could keep the fields on the more northern side of the site. And so the little pie shape outline of the field could be softball, could be baseball, but it's large enough to encompass either. But the reality is that it's a better idea to try to keep some field on here, because that's less that you have to rebuild somewhere else in town. And then you see a little like hockey stick shape just to the east of that baseball diamond, or softball field. That is like a retaining wall. And so if you do a retaining wall there, then you could get an overlapping full-size soccer field in the outfield of whatever, baseball, softball field you build over there. And so that sort of retains some of the existing usability that you have already in those fields, and sort of helps minimize how much rebuilding we have to do in other places. And then one added component is that we were talking about the possibility of being able to develop the east side of the site and put, a soccer field or something over there. The one thing to note is that on the west side, you would either need to, likely you would fill 7 feet on that side and cut 7 feet on the other side. But there's a 15-foot differential between the east side of that field and the west side of that field, given how the site works. And so putting a long, flat surface in that side of the site could be problematic, but is doable. And then you can see how the building could shape itself out or lay out and still maintain those sort of academic neighborhoods or clusters, grade level houses, whatever you want to call them. And it's not too bad. So we thought that this was actually a pretty viable option. And we actually ended up including this one in the option set as B6. And then the only other variation for the fields is to put, a brand new building right smack dab in the middle of all of them. And then you would end up having to bear the cost of all of the recreating of every single one of those fields somewhere else in town, which is several $1 million. So we thought that this B6 approach was the most sort of economical and viable solution in terms of fields, cost, and building all coming together on that side. So you can go to the next slide. And so tonight you're seeing, and you also, I think, saw in some of the package stuff that Tony sent over, these are really the cost comparisons and ranges that we're looking at this point. And so renovation of the Bird school at 450 students, it's not just a code-only upgrade. It includes finishes and upgrades to pretty much everything in the building, and with the goal of making sure that at the end of that everything is up to code. And so, but it includes systems and finishes and, looking at stairs and all that kind of stuff. And so you can see the price range there, 47 million, is roughly the ballpark we're talking about there. And then renovation addition, we lumped the 450 student option and the 905 student option together. And so the 63 million would be the small end, which is the 450 student size of an addition renovation. And then the 92 million is the bigger 905 student side of that. And then
Chris, just to clarify, these are construction costs?
Correct. Yep. These are construction costs. Yep.
Not total project costs.
Correct. And we have a different comparison with total project costs. I actually don't know if it's in this show or not. I think it is. But
yeah,
the renovation addition, so that's the renovation addition. And then you have a replacement school, which is options B1, or the B1S, B2S, B3S, B4S, B5S, and B6S. Those are in that price range, 67 to 73. And then the bigger school, which is B1 through B6, is for combined population is 92 to 97. And then the replacement options over at Johnson, which you can see are appearing to be substantially less. So you can go to the next slide. And so when we wanted to make sure you knew, refresh your memory about all of these options, because a part of this process is that we actually make a recommendation to leave some options behind at this stage and only study a certain number that are going into the PSR phase. And so the BR1, which is the renovation of the single school option, 450 students, is one that we recommend keeping in the mix, and it's shown here. And so the total project cost looks like it could be in the range of about $82 million for that kind of a project. And then you can go to the next slide.
So I just wanted to jump in and say, earlier this afternoon, I sent this table, which Chris just recapped this top part of the table. If you've printed this out, you can follow along with all the options. Basically, this row pertaining to each option, Chris is going to talk about them so you can see what they look like and just refresh your memory on what those options are. And then just to remind everyone, we do have the second option, not this option, but this option's now captured as option 6S and option 6, and Chris will eventually get to that. So if you did print out the table, the cost table, these rows pertain to each of the options, and Chris is going to go over one by one. So this is BR1, and we'll go right through them.
Yeah, and so BR2, again, I'm not going to get into a lot of the details here because it's just sort of a refreshment overview, and the biggest new piece of information is the cost. And so we're recommending that you do continue to study an ad reno project that includes both combined school on this site. And so this would capture that as a strategy. And so the total project cost there could be in the range of somewhere around $118 million. And these numbers, I just want to say, also include considerations for phasing. Like you can see in this option that we wrote down on we wrote down there that it, temporary modular, phasing requirements, stuff like that. So that's why some of these numbers are high, is because it includes items like that inside of those numbers. So you can go to the next option, B1 or JR1, which is the ad reno on
Chris,
the Johnson side. Yes.
quick question. I'm a little confused about the difference between the construction costs and the total project costs. You made a specific example there about modular space and so forth like that. But what other things would generally be in that additional cost to drive the total project cost up? How have you segregated those things?
Yep. Tony or Brian, did you want to cover that?
Brian?
Sure, I can talk about it. So Jack, that's the difference between, so the construction cost is what they're estimating would be the, cost from the contractor to actually build it, direct costs. And then the project cost is everything else associated with it. So that is the design fees, OPM fees, FF&E, contingencies, everything that goes into the project. So the quote unquote soft costs associated with a project of that size. And in addition, on the ones that are renovation, they've included things like swing space, the use of modulars, including phase construction where the duration might be a little bit longer on that project. So that construction cost might be a little bit higher than another option. But the project cost is the total project cost, and the construction cost is just like the direct bid cost from a contractor, so to speak.
Okay, will the total project cost include site work?
Yes.
Or would that be in construction?
Oh,
Construction includes
It's
site
in
work.
construction, yeah.
But the
Okay.
project cost is what you go to town meeting with, and the project cost is what you agree to with the MSBA.
Right. So for this option, Jack, what they're saying is that an ad reno at Johnson, using the existing Johnson building to get the square foot requirements of the ed program, is in the range of 120 million, kind of all in, and that includes conceptual estimates for construction, whatever you might need to do for swing space and phasing, furniture, design, OPM, contingencies, all that stuff, all in. So the town meeting number, in theory, would be $120 million. That's what we'd be asking. That won't get refined till schematic design, but that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
comment. In your project, I understand construction project costs. There's one that needs to be put on the future when you do these. It's reimbursable because some of it is, some of it isn't, and that could be a big swing. Correct?
Yeah, we actually have a slide to illustrate some of that later on at the end of this, Jack. But you're
okay.
right.
So you got that later. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we can. So actually, the big point here on the Johnson site ad reno is that we're actually recommending that we don't carry this one forward, and it's got some challenges with regard to site access and circulation for vehicles, and then trying to squeeze in the addition part outside of those zone 1 wellhead protection areas, and so we're basically telling you that we don't think this is a good option to continue on. So our recommendation is to not pursue this past PDP. So you can go to the next slide. And then here's all the bird options, or the next few slides. So B1, pay attention to the project cost and then our recommendation, because that's really, those last two columns are really the point of conversation tonight and sort of what we want to get through. And that's this option we're recommending that we do keep on the table. And so you can go to the next one, B1S. Same with this, it's the 450 student option, same kind of orientation strategy for the bird, and we recommend that we keep this one on for now. And then B2 is the next one. So B2 and B3 are the two schemes that we feel like have significant challenges with the grading on the east end of the site going towards Washington Street. And it would end up making a very challenged building versus very stepped, or, even having to do a lot of excavation. And so we feel like these aren't really great strategies when you've got others available to you. And so B2 and B3 and B2S and B3S, all four of those, we're recommending that we don't necessarily continue to study those. And in actual fact, in their category, the single school or combined school, these two options end up being a lot more expensive than other options on the site. And so we're sort of proposing that we take B2, B2S, B3, and B3S. We recommend that those don't get moved forward past PDP. And then you end up with B4, which is the next one. And that one is a different approach. That's the phased one where you can build part of the school and then tear down the bird and then build the rest of the school. And so that one being phased is a little bit more expensive, but is a different strategy that we want to keep studying in the next phase, the PDP. And so we're recommending that you do continue to study this, and along with B4S, which is the single school version of that. So we just want to keep those on the table and keep looking at them in the next phase. And then B5 here, same idea, is that this one, as the difference between B2 and B3, this one is sort of, it's a split school. So everything on the east or the west end of the school, so from basically the 9 and 905 students west, everything there ends up being on the first floor, and then the rest of the building is on floors 2, 3, and 4. And so it's like kind of a split level school. It's sort of purpose designed to take care of some of that grading issues, and so it does that better than 2 and 3 did. We recommend that we keep looking at this as a strategy for the next phase. And so the same with B5S, and so same idea here. We're just going to keep studying this. And then B6 is that new option on the East Street side of the building, or side of the site. And we do recommend that we keep looking at this one just to make sure that we uncover all of the nuances around building on the flatter part of the site. and continue to look at all the effects that has on sports fields and other things and throughout the whole town. And the same with B6S. So B6S is just basically a 2-story version of the same school. B6 is a 3-story school. And so that's the big difference between the two. And there could be other ways to arrange that in the same sort of footprint area. And so again, these are just sort of strategies for now for the PDP. And then if you go to the next slide. So the J1 option, which is, you can see it there. And so we're recommending not to keep J1, but keep J2. And the real thing here is that they're both new buildings on the site, and they, the MSBA, we can just narrow it down to say we need to keep a new build idea, new build concept on the Johnson site. We don't need to study both of them, but it could be that, you know, the Johnson site option becomes a mix between J1 and J2, or it goes back to J1 or whatever, but the MSBA will understand that the general strategy is new building on that, on the top of that hill up there. Which by the way, we had the borings done and came back with very favorable, looks like good news for what's the subsurface conditions over there. So all things pointing sort of in the right direction. And you'll notice that J1 and J2 are both some of the lesser cost options in the whole mix. So for combined school. And so the next slide shows basically that sheet that Tony was just talking about and condensed into one page. And you can kind of see it here at a glance that I think there's like 5 or 6 options that we're suggesting that we recommend not moving on with in the PSR. And then obviously, you know, a month from now or so when the district votes on the consolidation method to go to combined school or to stay at Byrd 450, that'll eliminate another half of whatever's left. So so hopefully within short order, we're sort of narrowed down to a real solid small group short list of options that we can really study in depth during the PSR and come out of the PSR with the one preferred option that we want to move into schematic design. So I think that's what I have for now, Tony. I don't know if you want to take questions or...
Yeah, I was hoping that if anyone had comments or questions, not just about the options, but about any portion of the PDP. The PDP document I uploaded today to the Dropbox link. It's basically all of the files that I sent last week and earlier this week, compressed into a bound document. And we'll have a couple of added administrative items like minutes from these meetings and a table on all of the votes, not just from the building committee, but from school committee on the ed plan. So that will get added after this meeting. We'll compile that and add it. So if anyone has comments or questions on the document itself or any of the options, this would be a good time, because we're going to go to a quick update on enrollment next.
And I'll just add to that. So the process is, the goal would be for the committee to vote the PDP tonight, assuming an approval. We'll package all this up, like Tony mentioned, with TAP A. We'll get this into the MSBA by the beginning of next week, which is what our current schedule has been showing. And then the MSBA reviews that for about 2 weeks, and we'll send back a bunch of comments if they have questions or if they think they need more support in the ed program. The district will have an opportunity to respond to that. So that is the current schedule. And then once that approval by the MSBA comes back, we'll turn full steam ahead in getting to a preferred solution. So that will happen in early to mid-December. We'll get the notice back from the MSBA, but the goal is to get it into them by the beginning of next week.
Jen had a question? Or?
Yes. I was just curious about the difference in cost between the combined school and the Johnson site and the proposals that we've looked at on the Byrd site. Just given the fact that I thought it was hilly up there and stuff, the price tag surprised me. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about, you know, why that came in so much lower.
The Johnson site, even though, I mean, I'll let Chris speak to this, but the part of the Johnson site where the school is sited is actually kind of like a flat plateau. So the school would be sited there without too much grade difference, whereas most of the options at Bird that are not on the field straddle a pretty big grade differential going from Washington Street into the site. So I think that accounts for some of the cost. And then on some of the Bird options, we also have a phasing strategy, which just means that we have to build a portion of the school, take part of Johnson down, and then continue. So I think that's where you're seeing probably the biggest differences. And if Chris has more, he can add to that.
I was just going to say, and even the options without phasing per se still have provisions to keep the existing Bird operational during construction. So in most of those, we are occupying with the new building at least part of the existing parking lot or part of the existing access road. So there's going to have to be provisions for temporary parking. There's going to have to be reconfiguration of access roads. So there is a fair amount of just work that has to happen to build on that site. But it is true, I think the grade is important because a lot of these have retaining walls. They have built into the portions of the floor that have retaining walls that are built into the hill, etc. And that adds considerable cost.
And then there's the new option, which doesn't have that problem because it has its own entrance off East Street. So the site would be segregated from the school, so it wouldn't be a lot of temporary conditions. But then you're also seeing in that cost added to that a field replacement premium, which gets added when you're losing fields or having to replicate fields. And that field work isn't necessarily reimbursable. So I think that's some of the biggest differences. All of those factors are factoring in to where Johnson is trending a little cheaper conceptually at this point.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Are there any other questions on the options or the document itself? So if that's the case, Mark, maybe we could entertain motions to move forward with submission to the MSBA.
Okay, if I could just ask Tony, just so everybody's clear, could you summarize, in a brief statement, what the preliminary design program submission is? You know what I mean? So that we know what the motion is.
Yeah, so the PDP document itself is made up of all these sections. So the school committee already has approved the educational program, and that's part of the document. And like I said, all of the votes taken related to that will be included in this document. And then we have all the, a small introduction, the schedule, a directory, all of the space summaries, which is basically a numerical representation of what the ed plan is in these tables. We have all of those existing conditions reports. I don't know if anyone looked at any of those, but they're numerous, and they range from building assessments all the way to surveys and site assessments. Those are all included in the document in their full form. Some of them are in the appendix. Some of them are part of the document. Then you have all of the site analysis, which also includes these options. We do include those costs in the recommendation, the conceptual costs and the recommendations by the team and TAP-A on which ones to pursue. The options that we have capture different strategies of how to approach the site. So we're not voting anything related to what the building's going to look like. We're just voting, capturing ways of making a feasible building on all the different sites. And then, like I said, the appendix has your original SOI. It has some supporting documentation like that. All of that's bound and people can look at that. So we're basically voting tonight to take all of these facts that we gathered and show the MSBA that we have a pretty good idea of where we're headed. So the vote would be to approve this document for submission to the MSBA. And like Chris said, they review the document. They'll definitely have questions that they will respond back to us, and then Bridget and her team can respond to any of the educational items, and the rest of the team will respond to any of the cost or option items. So that's kind of the process, but that's what we need, a vote to approve submission of this document to the MSBA.
Very good, thank you. So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the preliminary design program for submission to the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Gaositz,
Second.
and we have a second by Mr. Johnson. So I'm going to poll the committee if I could. Mr. Jeffrey Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Gaositz,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
We voting on what they recommended or just pushing this forward?
we're just pushing it forward. So there are no final recommendations in this.
Oh, okay, you're fine, yes.
We are actually voting on these also. So
Okay.
this actually gets included in the document. These recommendations that have been made.
So as in,
So if you look here, this column here where there really aren't options here that we're eliminating as far as strategy wise that aren't captured in other. So we have a few options at Bird because the Bird site's different. There are a few different spots where we can land the building, either out in the fields, at Washington Street, or tucked into the northern corner in a phased approach. And then obviously the consolidated at Johnson. And then we are required to keep these required by the MSBA, which is ad reno for both, and also just a renovation only of Bird. So we are voting on these recommendations as well to include in the document. If someone doesn't agree with these, we should just discuss it quickly and see if we can resolve
Mr.
whatever
Conroy,
it is.
So Mr. Conroy, it's not every single building opportunity. It's a representative sample of
Right.
different.
Exactly.
So we're voting on the yeses, correct?
Correct.
And so the noes are off the island, correct?
Correct.
All right, that's fine.
All right. Very good. So I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Salvatore.
I think Nancy has a question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Gallivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that, and I think Tony just answered this. We're not voting on the design. So in other words, there's still room to talk about, do we need spider legs coming off the building, or do we want a more like compact building? We're
Correct.
voting,
Yeah.
okay.
Correct.
I just wanted to be clear on that part.
I
Thank you.
can probably almost guarantee that your finished building will not look like any of these. These are just, we've been talking about, these are just test fits.
Okay,
So if the spider legs fit, then a more compressed one will definitely fit. And that's what we're gonna get into as we kind of move forward, so.
That's what the fun of the PSR is about. So,
Thank you. So Mr. Salvatore, sorry for the interruption. Your vote again, please.
Aye.
Very good. Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Very good. Mr. Frisha.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Connor.
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher.
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor.
Yes.
Very good. Ms. Lawson.
Yes.
Very good. Dr. Goff, pardon me.
Yes.
And Mrs. Gallivan.
Yes.
Very good. It is a vote.
Nancy?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have any further questions or?
Nope. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to congratulate the committee because, like I said, this is the first big milestone in the process, which is getting this PDP document and getting response back from the MSBA. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their efforts in reviewing all the documents and hanging with the team as we presented this. The next big decision to make, which is not going to be tonight, will be on consolidation. And the team has been working behind the scenes, especially the school committee, on this topic. And like Chris said earlier, once a vote gets taken to either consolidate or just go for a single school, a lot of the options will disappear. We'll basically, again, be narrowing down to half. So I'll let Brian update on the efforts that we've been making toward an enrollment decision, which is going to heat up early December.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. Just a couple updates since the last time we met. School committees held several focus group meetings with elementary school communities on the 5th and the 10th. I think we had over 50 in the first one and over 75 attendees in the second one. So a lot of good questions and conversation back and forth related to the project and some questions specifically related to enrollment. We've been putting together a draft of frequently asked questions, the FAQs, which include questions on the enrollment and basically all the questions received to date on the project through the community forums or through the email address. So we have a draft of that, and the project team is working on getting answers put to those questions, and we'll get those out on the project website this week and ahead of the next community meeting, which is scheduled for November 24th. We're also working on some of the items that go onto the evaluation matrix for consolidation, which we plan to finalize a draft after that community forum on the 24th, and then basically the run up to the school committee meeting on the 10th, where they will take a vote on what enrollment option they think is the best path forward for the school. So that's the next big vote. Nancy and Bridget, I don't know if you want to add anything to that summary. But I think a lot of good discussions has taken place so far, and I know we have more to come.
Yeah, we had a really good turnout for the last two elementary forums, so it was good to see people come out for that.
Nancy, anything?
I would add that we've been discussing it at our school committee meetings, and you know, we haven't like dug in and taken any votes, but from my sense is that we're seeing benefits from consolidation. We're seeing fewer concerns than I thought we might, and a fair number of the concerns seem to be able to be addressed in a fairly satisfying way. I think it's important for the community to know that we really do want to continue to hear from them, either through the website where they can submit questions, or by coming to the forum on November 24th. We're looking at this generally from an educational and a social emotional point of view. Now we have some information from the professionals about the financial and sort of practical points of view, and all those things will factor into our decisions. So that's just a brief summary.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks.
Yeah, Brian's going to get into some of the financials with the committee tonight. And we appreciate all the work that the school committee has done, especially with meeting with the smaller groups.
Yeah, very helpful. So as the committee starts to think about consolidation, some of the research in conjunction with TAP A was looking at some other communities and communities with similar populations to Walpole with similar middle school enrollments, and to kind of get a sense of what other districts have done in the past or are currently doing. And you can see from the list that a lot of similar districts that are around Walpole and the eastern part of the state have single middle schools with student enrollments similar to what is being proposed for this project. So it's not atypical, and I think, you know, TAP A can attest as well that it's probably more typical that you're seeing districts with combined middle schools or single middle schools. There are middle schools out there that obviously have a single middle school with lower student enrollment, but they're typically in smaller towns where they just don't have the overall student enrollment to begin with. There are not many school districts remaining that have similar population demographics as Walpole that still maintain multiple middle schools of the current size of Byrd and Johnson. There is another example out there. I believe Reading has a similar setup. There's only a handful as opposed to what you see districts doing now. And there are districts out there. We don't have Natick on the list, but they have multiple middle schools of this size, including 5th grade. I think we talked about that before. Norwood is currently in the MSBA process, looking at their middle school to Coakley, thinking about adding 5th grade to that to help them with some spacing issues they have at the elementary school. So it's not atypical a school of 905, which is what the enrollment here. So just some food for thought and to kind of put that in the back of your mind as we move forward. In analysis, now that we have some conceptual cost estimates, what we did was put together a quick little comparison between a consolidated or a standalone school. And these are the total project costs that were on the matrix that we just went through. So this is the all-in cost. So this is considering the cost of direct construction plus the soft cost of design, project management, furniture, contingencies, phasing, modulars, whatever might have to go into it. And basically on the consolidated middle school options, whether it was an ad reno or a new building, whether it was at Byrd or at Johnson, the range of those options was 114 to 126 million total project cost. When you looked at just the Byrd only, either an ad reno to Byrd or a new Byrd building, those ranges were 82 to 95. And a lot of that had to do with, obviously you're renovating an existing school, you're adding on to an existing school, there's phasing options, there's modular options. And you're also, the price per square foot is more expensive to get the space requirements needed for the education program. There's more efficiencies in a combined building, obviously, because you're combining a lot of the transition spaces and things of that nature, and you're getting a better fit for the population versus a Byrd only school, which to get the spaces that you need for the program, you have spaces that might not fit the population just the right way, so it's not as efficient. So if you look at a Byrd only school at 82 to 95, you put the same pricing to a Johnson only, add new or reno, making that assumption, 2 projects, if they were to be built simultaneously, meaning right now in today's dollars, 82 to 95 million for a total of 164 to 190 for 2 separate projects. Now, obviously the Johnson is not ready for a project. And, if the town were to pursue a separate Johnson project, the Byrd moves forward and they say, okay, well, let's do a single Byrd, let's go do a single Johnson project. How quickly could that happen? And would you be a town meeting away from getting something approved for a design, and then getting to this point, possibly could be done in 2 years without MSBA involvement. So when you look at the last grouping of numbers there, you have the Byrd cost today, and then you have a Johnson construction project, escalated for 2 years, assuming 5% escalation, which is what we've been seeing the last few years with the construction market, relatively, 3 to 7% on a given year. So, now the cost of Johnson obviously goes up if you build it 2 years later for in theory. So now that project is a little bit more expensive, and you can see how that compares back to a consolidated school. You're talking, 75% more in some cases between 2 separate buildings and 1 consolidated building. Next slide. And then looking at it from an MSBA perspective, so obviously the MSBA is involved with this project, and the reason that they allowed dual enrollments is they understand that there's needs at both schools, and that's a typical telltale sign that they understand that, as they allow dual enrollments and giving the community an opportunity to consolidate if they think that makes sense for them. So looking at the Byrd project, same numbers, ad reno 114, 126. The reimbursement rate on this project is right now roughly 48% of eligible costs, but we don't have those costs defined yet. And what we've been seeing in our past projects is typically districts are not realizing that full percentage. You're realizing something less of that by the end of the day, by the time all the eligible costs shake out. For this drill, we're assuming a realized reimbursement rate of 35% on this project. hopefully it's more than that, but we're going to realize that for this exercise. Which roughly means you're going to get reimbursed about 40 to 44 million on an ad, reno, or new bird consolidated project, which brings the price tag into the town at 74 to 82 roughly at this stage. When you apply that to also doing a Johnson project on the next grouping of numbers, you're going to get reimbursed for bird, but you quickly want to get into a Johnson project. The MSBA is not involved. You're going to pay the full price tag 100% from the town's perspective for that project. So using the numbers we looked at before, you're on the hook for all of Johnson. If you want to wait and say, well, we want to do Johnson, but when we have MSBA reimbursements, you have to get into the MSBA process again if you elect to only do a bird process now. So if you only do the bird project, the MSBA is going to move forward and refund based on a bird only project, and they'll make you re-enter their program through an SOI for Johnson. And typically, the MSBA does not allow a district to take on another major project while you're still doing a major project. So you'd have to allow the bird project to finish, which right now is approximately 4 years out between now and the end of construction, give or take, reapply, have an SOI accepted, go through the eligibility phase, and then get into a feasibility study phase for Johnson, which could be another 4 years till you get to the exact same point you are now with this project. So roughly it could be 8 years or more before the MSBA could consider a major project at Johnson. And that's assuming that the district gets accepted by the MSBA. Their SOI gets accepted. As you recall, it took several tries for the bird project. So that while that's happening, obviously costs are going up again, assuming a 5% escalation over the years. Just for this exercise, the cost of the Johnson only project goes up, roughly 35-40%. The MSBA comes on board and gives you the same reimbursement at that point in time that you got on the bird project, and you get refunded 40 to 47 million. So you've waited 8 years or 9 years to go through the process and basically have the same cost, 129 to 148, which is roughly almost double of what you pay right now for a consolidated building. So again, these are very rough conceptual numbers, but I think it kind of shows just the quick thinking that needs to happen of what are our possible options of doing a project now, doing a Johnson project later, both with or without the MSBA, or what are the savings that we could possibly realize through the economies of scale by possibly doing one building and picking up some of those efficiencies, obviously in square footage between the buildings, obviously in combining some of the spaces. And this is just related to construction project costs. We're not getting into operational efficiencies yet or anything related to staffing because that information isn't quite all the way vetted out yet. So just from a construction project cost perspective, this is the general concept. Any questions on that information?
So like Brian said at the outset, after submission of the PDP, the next big meeting will be community forum number 2, which happens right before Thanksgiving. So we'll get the document into the MSBA, and then we're tailoring a presentation which will have a quick project update on where we are right now, submission of the PDP, and then it'll have a heavy section presenting the consolidation versus single school option, and then we'll gather feedback from the community, and that'll obviously part of the matrix, the evaluation matrix that'll be considered by the school committee. And this group ahead of the school committee vote will be obviously the community input part of the equation, which will get feedback at that forum, and then school committee will vote on that on December 10th, and then we'll hopefully by then be done with the responses to the MSBA, and we'll obviously have the options narrowed down quite a bit from that vote, and then we get to work on some design. Does anybody have any questions on consolidation before we move on? Any comments or questions in general related to anything? I'm gonna try and cover any questions from the chat. Nancy, did you want a little more time for any discussion on PDP?
No, between what I was able to ask and what you had answered, I'm set. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the last piece of business for tonight, which is administrative, is voting on the October vendor invoice package. The jargon for this is VIP. So if you see VIP anywhere, it's the vendor invoice package. Basically, we collect all the invoices and track them against our total project budget. Right now, obviously, there aren't many invoices, just the Compass invoice for this month in the amount of $14,788, and then another invoice for TAP A's work at $36,250. A total combined ask of $51,038. Our down here you can see our first payment request reimbursement has gone to the MSBA, and they've reimbursed the district for the first time, and the second payment reimbursement has gone into the MSBA. These make it through the district. Mike ends up reviewing them along with the team and signs on behalf of the district. Total project budget, the feasibility study phase, total budget is 1.5 million to date. We've committed 1.2 million, which is TAP A and all of their consultants, to get to the end of schematic design, along with Compass's OPM fee. There's roughly around 300,000 left in the budget, and to date we've paid out roughly 250,000. We will be asking the district for an amendment of from this amount, from the $300,000 amount, to cover the small amount of work we just did at Johnson for geotech. We did receive a proposal for this from TAP A originally. We decided not to go forward with it originally to see about the bird site first, and then as we found out more and more about the feasibility of the Johnson site, the team decided to move forward and do the geotech work, and also the first phase 1 ESA, which was done, tour was done last week at Johnson, and I appreciate Principal Morganowick allowing us to tour the building quickly to visit some spaces for that report. So that's not a big dollar amount. It's around 15 grand, I believe. So there will be an amendment for that. So Mark, at this point, if there's no questions on this, I also sent out a more comprehensive version of this, which has the more broken out invoices related to these amounts, and also the payment reimbursement forms and tracking table that the MSBA uses to track reimbursements. So that was part of the package that went out. So if anyone has questions, we can take those now. And if not, then we could accept the motion to approve payment for October.
Do we have any questions? If not, I'd like to take a motion or accept a motion to approve the October vendor invoice package.
I'll move.
We have a motion from Mr. Anderson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Giositz. If I could please poll the committee. Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor.
Yes.
Very good. Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Just a reminder, I'm not a voting member. I just realized that after I voted, so.
I'm sorry. Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Frisha. Mr. Frisha.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Salvatore,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yep.
Ms. Giositz,
Yes.
and Mr. Jeffrey Fisher.
Yes.
Very good. We have a vote. Tony, anything else?
I don't know if this is an issue or not from procedural standpoint, but if Jim can't vote, I think he seconded the PDP submission.
I just
Should
can't
we
vote. I
just-
believe I can make a motion in a second, but Tony, I'll clarify that and get back to you.
Okay. I just don't want anything held up on the MSBA's end, because these minutes do get submitted to them. All right, there was one more question from the chat, which regarding modular costs. Modular costs are not reimbursable by the MSBA. So that's just something to keep in mind regarding what's reimbursable and what's not reimbursable.
But Tony, Jeff Fisher, I asked the question.
Yep, sorry.
A lot of the bird project costs that we're looking at, do those include the modular costs?
Yes, the total project cost included the modular cost, it wasn't recorded on the construction side.
Okay.
So if you look at the construction side, that's why any ones that require a phasing approach will include some amount for swing space. And then another factor that are not typical soft costs on the new option on the field there was an amount in the total project cost that included some amount of field replication if we did not preserve the field. So in one case we had a baseball field or a softball field, a full size, that we were able to preserve, but redoing whatever was missing was included. So those are the types of items that we're recording in the total project cost.
So Tony, I think we actually put the modulars into the construction cost.
Okay.
So you're right, the field was in the project cost, but the other ones, the modular was in the construction cost.
Okay.
And the fact is, in either case, it's not reimbursable as part of the overall cost.
Do we have any final questions or comments from the committee?
This is David Salvatore. One quick, Mr. Parr's good catch on Mr. Johnson's second. Should we just redo that vote just in case?
I was just gonna say the same thing, David. I'd feel much better. We don't have time to mess around with it.
Very good. We'll do that then. So this was the vote to submit the PDP to the MSBA. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right. So I'd like to once again ask for a vote to submit the preliminary design program to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
And I'll make the second.
All right, Mr. Jack Fisher made the motion. Ms. Nancy Gallivan is the second. Dr. Goff, your vote?
Yes.
Very good. Mr. Jack Fisher, your vote?
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan?
Yes.
Ms. Lawson?
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor?
Yes.
Very good. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah.
Mr. Salvatore?
Yes.
Mr. Conroy?
Yes.
Ms. Giositz?
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey Fisher?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. It is a vote. Do we have any other questions or comments?
Next meeting?
When is the next meeting, Tony? Do we have that on the schedule?
We don't have one on the schedule, but I would propose December 8th if.
Well, I was thinking about that, but my thought is if the school committee votes on the 10th on consolidation, my thought is if you met on the 15th, you'd have that decision one way or the other, and that would kind of be a big update as far as which path we're going down. Do you want to wait till after the school committee? Is there a pressing need? We'll get comments back from the MSBA on the PDP, but there's really not a pressing need for the committee to meet until we know what we're doing with consolidation, or do you want them, because we're going to take the recommendation from school committee whether or not to consolidate and then talk about it at this committee, correct?
Correct.
So do we want a tentative date for the 15th then?
That would be my suggestion, unless another date works in that week.
Any questions or comments?
No, that's fine.
All right, very
I
good.
do.
So we'll make that at least a tentative date.
Okay, so 12:15 would be
Very
the,
good.
the target date for the next meeting.
Any more questions or comments this evening?
Yeah, Mark, I got a question.
Yes, Mr.
No,
Fisher.
maybe this is to you, Jeff Fisher.
Yep.
You or Mr. Johnson. You know, we've got three bodies that are voting ultimately on the PDP, on the consolidation, building committee, school committee, and the select board. If any one of those, you know, has a different vote or, you know, different stance on how we move forward, how does that work?
Well, just for clarification, the school committee is voting just to approve the ed plan, and then they make the first vote on consolidation from a program standpoint, but they're not necessarily voting submission of this document to the MSBA. So that's the purview of this committee. And then obviously on a consolidation vote, the school committee would vote, and then also this building committee would either agree or endorse that vote. And then I believe it would also be voted on by the Board of Selectmen. So the consolidation vote is a multiple, and I think, vote, because obviously all the bodies in the town would want to agree to it from multiple standpoints, from a school standpoint, a program standpoint. The building committee obviously is deciding about the project, and then financially at some point, the Board of Selectmen would have to chime in. So I think consolidation is one of the only items that that multiple bodies would have to agree on. And then as we go further, it's basically on the purview of this committee for the final option and funding, and then obviously the town at the end of schematic, the town ballot vote. So I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's how I see it.
So there's the potential for a hang up, but we can't anticipate that just yet. So if one board disagrees with the other.
On consolidation.
Correct. Do we have any other questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Jack Fisher. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Lawson. Dr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Jack Fisher,
Yes.
Ms. Nancy Gallivan,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Salvatore,
Yes.
Mr. Conroy,
Yes.
Ms. Gayositz,
Yes.
Mr. Jeffrey Fisher,
Yes.
and Mr. Breen votes yes. The meeting is adjourned.
Have a
Thank you,
happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving, everyone. Stay
Good
safe.
night now.
You too,
Take
Tom.
care.